it's important that you're working with people who are supportive and who are honest and knowledgeable. I can remember I was not a gifted mechanic, but my brother Emery was, and we would be working on something that I thought I couldn't even picture how we were going to fix this particular thing, but he believed it was going to happen, and before you knew it, he had done it. And so you have to believe that it can be done. It's adapting to the situation, to the environment, to the people who show up, who are there to help you that weren't there yesterday. It is being able to adapt and survive, and not only survive, but to succeed.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. This is Ben, and this is the Unexpected Podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. I've got a very special guest with me today. It is my dad. Jim Crawford is here with me today to talk about his journey as a small business owner in a few different facets, and also other things that he's done through the years. He's here to talk to us about that because we've always had, to this point, we've had small business owners who are on the front side within the first 10 years of their business. And now my dad, Jim, just retired from the workforce, and he's going to be helping at Red Barn and around the farm and things like that in his gigantic vegetable garden and other things that Mom makes him do. But wanted to take the opportunity to have everybody hear from somebody who's been through a lot of life's struggles and challenges as far as business and personal, and has come through it very strong. So the first thing to do before we go any further is to mention how you find our sponsor, Red Barn Home Furnishings. You can find Red Barn at redbarnhomefurnishings.com or Red Barn Home Furnishings on Facebook, or red_barn_home on Instagram, and also YouTube. If you're listening to this, more than likely you're listening to this on YouTube. Unfortunately, my dad is completely off of social media, so you'll never be able to find him, but he did do just what they said, 33 years you were doing insurance, health, life insurance sales. Is that right, Dan?
Yeah, that's right, Ben. Yes.
But before that, that's kind of, you talked about it at your retirement luncheon the other day about your background and your history. And I've talked about my background and history here, and most of the people that we have on do the same thing. So you obviously didn't start out in insurance. You're small town kid, same as me. We grew up on the same farm. But kind of what was your pathway that got you to just a short one? What got you to the insurance sales? What led you to that point?
Well, Ben, I feel that I'm kind of fortunate in that I know a little bit about my ancestors, and on both sides, Mom and Dad, both back as far as you can see, they were farmers. And both of them have kind of interesting stories. On my mom's side, she was born in Monroe County, and just off of the Ohio River down there, and so she grew up with three brothers, and they had some flooding issues, and for 2 consecutive years they lost most of their crops. And so my mom's mom, Grandma, who was tough, had to be tough to make it through those days, said to her husband, "George, get in the car, take the oldest son, drive north, and as far as you can go, and get back here in time for chores in the evening, and find a farm." And so that's the short version of what he did. And they found one in a little place called Richmond, Ohio. And so they made the deal, sold what they had, put everything on a barge, and up the Ohio River, offloaded it in downtown Steubenville, drove those cattle on horseback and wagons and so forth, just what they had to do, the 10 miles to their new farm. On their way, they're going through downtown Steubenville, which was industrialized and had a large factory workforce. And they decided that they didn't have to spend all their time growing crops anymore. They had people they could sell things to. And so over time, over the lifetime of my mom and her brothers, they developed a big retail route into Steubenville, selling dairy products, apples. On Wednesdays, the women butchered chickens. So they sold fresh meat. This was a little right about the time that refrigeration came in. So anyway, to me, that was kind of an interesting, they took a hard situation and made a go of it. On my dad's side of the family, slightly different, but he was on a plot of ground that his great-great-grandfather, somebody after the Revolutionary War, they got a couple of sections of land in Richmond. In those days, you just had to farm it for 5 years, and it was yours. There might have been a few bucks involved there, $5 an acre or something. And so in the 1800s, this worked out pretty well because you were talking about sheep and horses, and the hills on that farm that didn't make any difference. If you've ever been to Ireland and you saw the hills and the way they handled sheep over there, you can see those people came to southern Ohio and said, yeah, we can handle this. This is just like being back home. Well, this worked out okay until the age of tractors came along, and those tractors with rubber tires couldn't hang on to those hills. And so my dad, who had, was married by then, one of the Hill family that came up on the Ohio River there, and moved up to the land where Ben and I are living on right now, and, began farming here. So when I grew up, farming or agriculture was what I was deeply interested in. I loved cattle, and of course every young farm boy loves driving tractors, and out of necessity, I was driving tractors, pulling a hay baler when I was 8 or 9 years old, and by the time I was 10, I figured I was as good as any adult as when it came to driving a tractor. So that's just kind of the good fortune that I had, because my ancestors had lived this making lemonade out of lemons. So I had an interest in farming, and my parents wanted me to go to college, so off to Ohio State I went after living at home and commuting a couple years at Mount Union. And I wasn't maybe the best student. It took me 5 years to get through instead of 4. And in the meantime, I got a draft notice from the government that said you're taking too much time. Come and pass a physical, and we'll see what happens. Well, I passed the physical, and they said, in 90 days, you're going in. You're going to be drafted. Unless you can make a deal with one of the 4 branches that will protect you from the draft. And so I went to all of them, and the Marine Corps said, yeah, we'll let you graduate if you agree to come into officer candidate school upon graduation. Well, they were the only ones that would protect me from the draft. So it was the only deal I had, and I did join the Marine Corps. They said, no, we want to guarantee you one thing, and that is you will be going to Vietnam. So that was my guarantee. And I got to spend a little time in Asia over there where I never saw a tractor or very much agriculture other than wading through rice paddies. But somehow, you've been around people who adapted, and it can be done, and that helps a lot.
Yeah. So you did a lot of background there. So some dates to give people an idea. We had the land that Grandpa was on down in Richmond that the family was originally on. We were on there since, was it 1860 or something like that? Is that right?
That came just after the Revolutionary War, so we still
Sooner
have the
than that.
deed from James Madison, 1814.
So 1814. Sorry, I was wrong on that one. And then Grandma's family came over from Monroe County up the Ohio River. Right about when?
When my mother was a teenager, so it was around 1915.
1915 or so. And then the family moved up here in 1944.
I'm 44 when I was an infant. Yeah.
When you were an infant, and then off to Vietnam. When you got back from Vietnam, you came back to farming, right?
Yeah, my brother was holding down the fort, and while I was gone, and so he and I and our dad farmed here together for a few years, and somewhere along the line, I couldn't imagine that my body was going to hold up at this sort of pace for a lifetime. And between my brother, who was a very gifted mechanic, and me, who loved livestock, we made it work. Each of us brought something else different to the table. But after we had done this about 10 years or 9 maybe, it was right about the time you were born, Ben, he and I decided that we were going to do something else. And so I went to graduate school to get a business degree, and then he spent a few years as a truck driver.
Yep. So the family had been farming probably back into when we were still in Ireland and all that stuff.
Yeah, farming was all that I could ever find. That it was
always farmers.
It was all in our DNA. Yeah.
Farmers and ministers, right?
Yeah, that was another option. You could always do that.
But so after, we'll say, a few hundred years of farming in our DNA, you and Uncle Emery both made the pretty substantial decision to, you decided to move on, that farming was either going to bankrupt you or kill you, and you both decided that there was something else you could be doing, so you decided to make that jump. And that's a jump that a lot of people struggle with. That's always the big question that people ask me, or the people ask other small business owners or people that went out on their own, that the stress of making that change to the unknown, how do you deal with that? And that's not the only time you've done it. You've done it multiple times through the course of your life, through getting drafted and going into the Marine Corps, and then leaving farming and going to get your MBA, and then when you were a personnel director at the T&W Forge, you left again. You made that jump, and that's something that people want to know about. Oh, how is it that you were able to deal with the stress of that and come out successful on the other end?
Well, if we could go back to my years in the Marine Corps, it was all kind of foreign to me. But I had no plan B. I had to make it through officer candidate school, and so I did. And I was just fortunate, but knowing that you can do it if you just try hard enough, that helps. And then when we made the decision to leave farming, we did it because one thing, didn't have to give up the farm that we were living on, because that had a lot of emotional ties for us. We wouldn't have to sell the farm and leave. We were solvent, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really know what getting an MBA meant, except that I would enhance my ability to find employment. And I was just confident that whatever the job was, I could probably do it.
Mm-hmm. And so when you were going to school, I was a little kid, and I vaguely remember still having cows around here. But I remember you telling the story about how it was kind of a shock when you got to graduate school, because you had said earlier that you weren't the greatest student when you were at Ohio State, and you got to Kent State and there was higher standards.
Yeah, it was interesting because at Ohio State I had A's in agronomy and, A's and B's and things that I loved, but Greek myth and that other stuff I wasn't so good at. So I just kind of viewed myself as an average student, and I got to graduate school and they said, you are not allowed to get C's or you will be asked to leave. And so I thought, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. They didn't tell me that. And so I found that because I had no plan B, I had to buckle down, and fortunately I had a wife who actually, she should have been the one in school because she was always an A student, but she understood the situation and backed me all the way. And so I made it through graduate school and enjoyed it, and found that getting A's was kind of not so bad. It was possible. I just had never had the right mindset before.
Gotcha. So there's a common theme running already here, is that when it comes down to it, it all comes down to your focus and mindset when you're going through stuff. If you give yourself an out, you're going to take it.
Yeah, when I finally got employment, it was at a very unagricultural place. It was a factory with 3 labor unions. They made hot forged products for like Mack Truck and Boeing and so forth. And it was like nothing I had ever done before. But anyway, the guy who hired me had an agricultural background, and he thought, well, we can teach you what you need to know. And over time, there was a couple of themes that I found out were important, and that was to always be truthful, and that's the main thing, and that relying upon other people to help you. When I was in the Marine Corps, I relied heavily on other people to help me through things because I had never been in a war zone before. And so the people that had been there pulled me through. And it was the same in this factory setting over time. There was a learning curve, of course, but I found that people are people and they want to be treated fairly and consistently, and they want to know that you are a predictable leader. They can count on you. They don't have to worry.
Yeah. I know that through the years, you're always the first person I ask for advice with stuff. And when I was doing my time with FedEx and my short stint with UPS, you were a resource that I always called and asked questions to because of your experience there at T&W, and that was always the direction you gave me, was always be honest, be consistent, treat people fairly, and with respect. And because of those things, I was very successful at FedEx. And it's actually funny because I think it's funny. Because Grant, my older brother, I haven't mentioned him on the show yet, but my older brother, he also worked for FedEx, and one of our upper managers said to him at one point, he said, "I got to meet your parents, your father, the guy that raised these two guys that are such outstanding managers, and all we ever did was just do what you told us to do as far as handle people." And we're both, Grant's very successful doing what he does, and I was when I was with FedEx, and I do okay with the furniture stuff now, but it's all following the path that you had laid out for us. And when we would ask for advice, you give us good advice with that stuff. At some point, though, you were doing good at T&W Forge. You were learning these things. What were some of the successes that you had there that you were proud of?
Well, we had it was a typical manufacturing atmosphere with the typical problems, and one of the biggest we had two that were significant. One was absenteeism, and in forging, all of the hot forging is what you'd call a crew-served apparatus. It's kind of like if in the military you have crew-served weapons where you have several people that have to work together. And in a hot forge operation, everybody had to work together. And so issues that we had were workers' compensation, where the way the system is set up, if a man is off work for 7 days, there's a good chance that maybe 50-50 chance that he's going to continue to be off work. And so I didn't dream up this idea myself, but I developed a committee of all the different unions plus somebody who was in the office worker who wasn't in a union, and we would meet once a month at early in the morning, like 6 or something, and I would bring donuts and we would talk about various things. But something that we came up with that was not initially accepted was that if we went 30 days without a lost time accident, then everybody would get, and the committee would decide on some trinket, like a coffee cup or tape measure or keychain or something like that. We had a guy that in Canton who would come into these meetings and sell us these things. They would be personalized. And so we said, if you go 30 days without a lost time accident, everybody gets one of those. If you go and every 30 days, it goes all over. You get a new one, another one. But if you go a whole year without a lost time accident, we will feed everybody a hot meal. Bring it in, catered. Everybody would get a hot meal. Well, this was met mostly with laughter because it was undreamed of. Well, we weren't without accidents, but anytime anyone was injured, we didn't let them take a day off. They came in, we paid them, they got something sorting Band-Aids, or it could be trivial, but we never let them go home. Fortunately, we didn't have anybody lose a hand or anything serious like that, but
You're talking light duty work.
light duty, yep. And so at the end of the year, we had the catered meal because we'd made it work, hadn't been done before, and that was maybe the most satisfying to me. Shortly thereafter, I left and got into the insurance business. But anyway, you asked what was it?
Yeah. I know that we've talked about that moment. If I remember correctly, you were honored at something out in California or something for that program that you'd set up. And I remember as a kid, we all had T&W Forge coats because that whoever it was that you guys bought the stuff off of, the guys had earned coats, the workforce had earned coats, and so we were a bunch of kids running around with those coats on.
Yeah, when there was all of the forging operations in the country had an annual meeting, and we submitted that program, for approval because they asked what we had done that might be of interest and so forth. And so we did get the prize for the most successful program of the year.
That's something to be proud of for sure. But so you had just said that even though that was a great moment for you, you shortly thereafter decided that you didn't want to be there anymore. You went into the independent insurance world, into sales, and you had touched on that earlier, that Grandma's family was in sales and did the sales things, and you said it was in your DNA along with the agricultural stuff. But what led you to that point where you're like, I want to make this jump, I want to try something different, because the forging world just wasn't for you?
Well, I had a couple different jobs in the 10 years at T&W Forge. I started out as an accountant, and eventually I got the job of personnel manager, about which I knew nothing, but my secretary helped me. And we had hiring and firing sorts of things that would happen. And a girl came into the office one day and she said, "I see you're hiring people, and do you test them at all?" I said, "No, we don't test them." I said, I have developed my own test, and that is, I've found that left-handed people are better employees. You can't miss hiring a left-handed person. She said, "Well, that's very interesting, but why don't you take one of these tests yourself? You're happy with what you're doing, but why don't you take it and see if that still holds true for you?" So I took the test, and it came back and said I should be in sales. And for some reason, at that point, I got to get out of here and into sales. And somebody who was a friend suggested that and he suggested a particular company that he was associated with. But anyway, trial and error. It was another big leap in my lifetime, but anyway, because I had a wife who stuck with me, and even though we had all four of you by then, it was early stages were difficult, but over time, it worked out very well.
Yeah, sure did. Well, time frame, we're talking mid 90s. I think I was in junior high, maybe. Grant was in college. Lydia was in high school, and Evan was in grade school, I think. So, that's a big stress to leave a job that there's that whole the evil thought of you knew what you were into at T&W, but something just wasn't sitting right, and the idea of going and doing sales was attractive. And like you and Larry were talking about the other day, when you started out, and I remember being a kid when you started out, there were some tight ones, and but you persevered through it. So, a lot of people out there trying to start their own business or small business owners, and well, you've said that one to me too. Is a lumpy income when you're a small business owner. You got to get used to that, and I guess when you made that jump, is there like a moment where you were like, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do?
I'm not sure because it took a year or two. Once I earned my first trip, which was to Montreal, where Susan and I got to go up there. Then I thought, yeah, maybe this is okay. But initially, of course, it doesn't matter what you're doing to start out. For the most part, it isn't all roses initially, but my wife stuck with me, and there was no plan B.
No plan B. One phrase you said to me when I was, I don't know, I think I was pissed off about something. I don't remember what company I was working for at the time, but you told me when you're in a new job, you're like a rocket ship. Lots and lots and lots of effort at the beginning to get into orbit. And once you get into orbit, everything's okay, but you got to put in that time and that effort. And, sometimes that takes longer. A lot of people, especially these days, everybody wants instant gratification for what they're doing. And you're talking about years of muscling through and powering through for years. But that perseverance paid off. Like you said, it paid off. When was it when you were, we talked about that the other day some, you were kind of out and around for a couple, 3 years with a different company, and then you found Hackenberg and Associates where you just retired from. Was there a time when you went over to be with Hackenberg that you were like, all right, yeah, this is home. This feels right.
Well, that's pretty much the capsule version, but we had to kind of hunt and peck for a little while, a year or so, before we found our niche, because insurance is a really big field, and there's lots of competition for it. There's not quite as many insurance agents as there are attorneys, but there's a bunch of them out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so Larry was Hackenberg was just starting out kind of when you crossed paths with him.
He had been a school teacher.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. And he was upset because he didn't have a winning record as a basketball coach. And So anyway, yeah, our paths crossed, and it wasn't like instant. This is a great thing. It's just, you know, because our backgrounds were totally different. He was nothing but basketball for generations, and I was nothing but farming and so forth for generations. So
Yeah. Now, it's something I've talked about with like my story when I started out doing the furniture, and you've been there for that whole journey. At the beginning, like I was taking any job I could get just to get my name out there. And the other day when you guys were talking about the beginning, you mentioned that you were willing to go anywhere in the state of Ohio to get a sale. Through the course of that, was there any like crazy stories or anything that comes to mind that happened and you're like, it just, you kind of scratching your head like, man, there's no way this could have happened to me if I wasn't doing this?
I'm not sure, but I not only was licensed in Ohio, I was so eager, and that is, I was also licensed in the neighboring states of West Virginia and Pennsylvania, because every now and then there'd be a need for it, and I wanted to have that. And when I started in the business, I never could have envisioned doing as much traveling as I did. But you make referrals, and a referral is the strongest form of progress you can get when somebody is so happy with what you've done for them. And then you've got family situations where, especially for me, I sent out flyers or postcards to farmers, and so you would get a farmer, and you'd get the farmer's neighbor, you'd get his brother, you'd get a nest, so to speak. And so it's that's kind of a funny thing, but you get more progress through people that you're already dealing with than always getting brand new people. I can recall I had some leads up around Cedar Point, Edison's hometown. I can't remember the name of the place. Milan. And so I had a little time between appointments, and I walked into this store, some closeouts place, and I bought a piece of luggage, gave him a personal check, and he said, "Oh, you're from Minerva. My relatives are from there." And of course, it was some relative of Kishman's, and I thought, man, small world. But it's, if you take the self-made borders down that you have, it really helps. Like when my grandmother and her family moved, and grandma and grandpa moved up here from Monroe County, where there were more deer than people, and came through Steubenville, they kind of changed their outlook and said, we don't have to raise tobacco and corn, and so we got all these people here, they need food. And so they kind of changed their approach, and even though my uncle didn't have any sons, he had 2 daughters, and that's what he had to work with. And he sent them into Steubenville every week on a retail route, and you just make do with what you have. It's like each of you kids learn to drive tractors and cars and trucks at an early age because we needed to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I recall being a young child, and you guys couldn't keep me off the equipment. I got in trouble all the time for getting on equipment, more than once. Emery got me a couple times, and I remember getting hollered at. But that was, like you said earlier, though, being a little kid and being able to run equipment, man, that's fantastic stuff. And it's a foreign thought to a lot of people these days. Sticking a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old or on a piece of equipment, and it's a classic family story that we like to talk about. Was your brother, Uncle Emery, being 8 years old, running a team of horses in the hills of Richmond County, and working ground all day at 8 years old, doing a grown man's job because that's what they needed him to do, because it was it was during the Depression.
Yeah. If you've ever been to a plowing contest, which is horse-drawn plows, you'll find that many of the contestants are 8-year-old Amish boys.
Yeah. Let's kind of talk a little bit about the years in the insurance industry, but I guess to swing back and touch on what you had mentioned about, with yourself or with grandpa and grandma or their grandparent or their parents, is the ability to adapt. They adapted to kind of pivot from what they had been doing to what the future was. They saw what they needed to do instead of trying to force what they had been doing into a situation that's not needed.
Yeah, and I neglected the case of my father's side of the business. As I said, his Crawford farm, where all 5 of us kids were born, and he and his siblings were all born there on land that had been in the family since James Madison deeded it in 1814. When my dad was at Mount Union, his second year up there, his father died, so he was forced to come home and take over the farm and take care of his mother and 2 sisters and younger brother. Not in his plans. He never really aspired to do that. Certainly wasn't ready for it when he was 19 or 20 years old. But that theme just kind of seems to repeat itself in life and in my family. But it was another case where there was no plan B. He had to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's the way to put it that you just said, is it's a reoccurring theme where through the course of family history and through your life, where you have kind of these I guess gut check moments would be what they say nowadays, but these moments where you had to overcome some adversity and make positive of it. And I think you said making lemonade out of lemons. But so you had that as an example of, grandpa and grandma did that, and then they're, back through the line, obviously if there was somewhere on the line somebody decided to come over from Ireland and come over to the States and all that, but it just, like you said, it's the recurring theme. But so when you were doing the insurance business, was it just health insurance the whole time, or life insurance the whole time, or did you have to add things or pivot when you were doing that?
Yeah, it's adapting. It's adapting to the situation, to the environment, to the people who show up, who are there to help you that weren't there yesterday. It is being able to adapt and survive, and not only survive, but to succeed.
Is that what you would say would be the advice that you would give to somebody going out into creating their own business, is to not necessarily get stuck on one thing, but be willing to adapt?
Well, it's important that you're working with people who are supportive and who are honest and knowledgeable. And I can remember I was not a gifted mechanic, but my brother Emery was, and we would be working on something that I thought I couldn't even picture how we were going to fix this particular thing, but he believed it was going to happen, and before you knew it, he had done it. And so you have to believe that it can be done. And that's it's what we would call attitude.
Yeah, attitude. So it's attitude and not having a plan B. Those are the two keys to success.
Those are maybe that plan B recurred a lot in my lifetime and that of my ancestors, but it is a common theme. If you have someone to support, or something bad has happened to you, such as when I was subject to the draft and I wasn't doing school, I was given the choice, drop out of school and be drafted, or stay in school till I finished and deal with the demands of the Marine Corps, where I would be an officer there, but the guarantee that I was going to Vietnam, which somehow I lived through. We didn't even get into the war zone stuff, which is okay. But, with that situation, 3 years in the Marine Corps, you learn that the guy next to you is facing the same challenges that you are. And that's kind of like if you run an athletic team or something. It's a team sort of thing. But
yeah. And so did that make it a little bit easier when you were working with at Hackenberg, where you're in that team scenario again? You've got you and Larry, and then a number of the people that were there, relying on them. Did that make it?
Yeah, because you'd been down that road before, and you knew that was necessary.
Okay.
Yeah. And you needed friends, and you needed people who knew what they were doing, and you needed people who were honest.
Gotcha. And so maybe a big mistake that a small business owner or a business owner can make is thinking they don't need people, or that they know everything. Is that something you would say holds true?
I suppose that could be a certain type of personality, but if you're going into a small business, it's going to take time and as much support as you can get. That's what you need.
Gotcha. I know that I've had some gems over the years that you've said to us as kids that I say to other people, and they just kind of look at me and don't know what to think of me. But like the one that I say pretty regular is, it takes a big man to admit that he's wrong. You've been saying that one since I was 5, but that was something that always stuck with me when I was doing the FedEx World, and then here with the furniture at Red Barn. You had always told me that be willing to admit when you're wrong, and then always treat every single customer like they're the only customer.
You want to treat them the way you want to be treated. And that ends up meaning a lot to them.
Yeah. That's how you create loyalty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That it's always that's a tough pill for a lot of people to take, though, as far as the admitting when you're wrong, and sometimes you have to even keep your mouth shut when you're not wrong. And that's another tough one sometimes too.
Well, we're so critical of our political leaders when they are very, very reluctant to admit that they're wrong.
Yeah, it's a hard human emotion to be able to deal with. But it's also important when you're doing this stuff is admitting when you fall short on something. So to kind of change gears for a second, do you have, because over the years, being a kid, you come home and you would tell us stories and things like that. Do you have a funny story from your insurance days that, like something that a particular customer or something that just kind of like you live for those moments where every once in a while you'd have a customer just kind of shock you or make you laugh, or do you have any of those moments or anything like that?
Thinking I'm not coming up with anything there unless there's something that you're driving at that I'm not.
No, not anything in particular. I don't think we can tell the one-armed man story, can we? The guy that used the toilet in the middle of the funeral.
Yeah, there was. When I took over the job of personnel manager, I was moving from an accounting in the business with the company, accounting to personnel, which didn't seem to make sense, but I was happy to do it. And no one told me how to do the job, and so I just did whatever I thought was right, which meant going to the hospital if somebody was injured, or if there was a funeral, I would go. And so one of the men lost his wife due to cancer. And so I took the plant manager and we went to the funeral, which was not far away. But it was a real casual atmosphere. Wasn't a big city sort of funeral home. And we walked in there and the plant manager and I were the only two guys wearing suits and ties. And so people would come up to us and say, well, where's the bathroom anyway? Or what time does this service start? And we'd say, well, I don't know, we're just here like you. And so finally the real minister came up to us and asked us, what time is this supposed to start? And I said, well, it's supposed to be at 2:00. It's about now, so I guess it's okay to go ahead. And he said, okay, thanks. And so he went up to the other end of the funeral home. It was kind of a circuitous route. And he said, I married Jim and Linda, 25 years ago or something like that. And this poor woman had died a horrible death of cancer. And he said, I believe she looks better today than on the day they were married. About that time, a guy in the audience not far from me with one arm, and here in Ohio, if you know the Sam Shepard murder case in Bay Village from the 50s, he always claimed that the real murderer was a one-armed, bushy-haired man. Well, at this funeral, a one-armed, bushy-haired man got up and found the bathroom that the rest of us didn't know where it was. And so that was during the service, he did that, and as he left the bathroom, he left the door open and flushed the toilet. And his wife turned, all shades of red that she possibly could. But that was one of those kind of weird scenario moments that just kind of happen.
Yeah. For the people that aren't familiar with the Sam Shepard, the movie The Fugitive with Harrison Ford was made after that. So one of the things that I always ask everybody that has come on here, because we'll get this wrapped up. We're coming up on an hour. Is when you've walked in while I'm out here working, and you always love to make fun of the music that I'm listening to, especially the heavy stuff. You say that it's Mom's favorite song, which if anybody knows her, that's not accurate. But so music's a big part of what I do, and I always ask everybody what their top 5 favorite songs are. Would you be able to hammer it down to 5 songs that you have as your favorite 5 songs?
Well, maybe not top 5 groups, but I've found myself, and I don't know how it happened, but when I was at Ohio State, you had a big Veterans Memorial downtown and got a lot of big names in there.
Yeah.
And so I was fortunate because tickets back then was $5, and even though I might not have been able to get anybody else who went with, I saw the Beach Boys, and I saw a bunch of guys that I would just call soul men, and that was Junior Walker and the All-Stars, James Brown, and Wilson Pickett. So those were big names. When you see somebody live like that, you don't forget it. And so that's kind of where I would put that.
You would go to the artists that you got to see in person when you were in school. So Wilson Pickett, James Brown, Beach Boys. What was the other one?
Junior Walker and the All-Stars.
Junior Walker and the All-Stars.
But if you remember the movie Miss Congeniality,
yeah,
when she walks out of looks like an aircraft hangar where she's all made up and singing a Wilson Pickett song, Mustang Sally.
Oh yeah.
And I just love that scene in the movie, and seen him do that live, it meant a lot to me.
That's cool. So like you said, the Motown sound, the soul music.
Yeah.
Those were your favorites when you were younger. I remember listening to a lot of that stuff.
I also saw Johnny Cash in person before he was married to June Carter.
Okay.
So there's number 5.
There you go. Johnny Cash live.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I know we just scratched the surface of all the stuff all the sales and life knowledge that you have. But I know that through the course of my life and Grant's and Lydia's and Evan's, people have always asked how we got to be the people that we are, obviously. And without trying to sound too high on myself or anything like that, but I was always successful at every job that I did because of the direction that you and Mom had given us. And I wanted to give folks a chance to hear some of the wisdom that we grew up with and witnessed. And I appreciate you coming on here and talking with me for a little bit, and sharing your stories and the things that you've done through the course of your life, even if it's just a little bit of it, so that maybe, like I said, I've had a lot of people on the front side, just starting out small businesses. I'm still under the 10-year mark, and you've been telling me for the last 10 years it takes 10 years to become an overnight success.
Yeah, I didn't make that up, but it is true.
It is true. So, having that knowledge that you've had, that you've earned through the course of your life, and sharing that is, I think it's important for people to hear, because too often than not, younger generations, mine included, think that they've got it figured out when they don't. And so I appreciate you sitting and talking with me for a little bit, Dad.
I did want to mention one other thing, and that is, you know the answer to this, but it helps that early in my life I married the right woman the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. Having the right spouse is extremely important, and having that love and support, it goes a long way. That's another big key.
And I'm proud to say that I married up. I was not so insecure that it bothered me that she was a lot smarter than me. You got to get over that.
Not that much. I've read a statistic that you got to be within 10 IQ points of your spouse to be able to make it.
Okay, well, it could be she dragged me up there. I don't know.
Maybe. You never know. But that is a good point. Having a supportive, loving spouse, accountability partners, what some people might call that. Also, obviously, strong faith that you're doing what God wants you to do. That's also important.
That was so important to me working with in the insurance business, because I was surrounded by and only working with people with a strong faith. So I wasn't worried about them going off losing it.
Yeah,
you know.
It's extremely important. It's you can't go wrong with having a strong faith in God and His plan for you, I think. But to wrap it up, like I said, I thank you, Dad, for sitting down with me for a little bit here and talking. And I really appreciate it. I hope everybody that listened to this got something out of it, that they see the true value in the things that you shared with us today. Once again, if anybody would like to find Red Barn Home Furnishings, you can find it at redbarnhomefurnishings.com. You can find Red Barn on YouTube, Instagram. The handle on Instagram is red_barn_home. Also on Facebook. And truly appreciate everybody getting on today and listening to my dad and I kind of BS for a little bit. But I know that I wanted to give you an opportunity to share some of your insight, because it's helped me, and I know that it could help somebody else. So once again, I appreciate it, Dad.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Yep. And everybody have a great day, and God bless.